In the spring of 2025, something happened that barely made the front pages of Western newspapers. China's Ministry of Commerce issued a quiet administrative notice. It was written in dry, bureaucratic language. It contained no declarations of war, no threats, no dramatic speeches. It simply announced export restrictions on 7 categories of rare earth elements, the minerals with names most people cannot pronounce, like dysprosium, terbium, and neodymium. Within 48 hours, the stock prices of defense contractors in Washington fell. Factories in Japan quietly suspended production lines. Engineers in Germany made urgent phone calls to their suppliers and heard the same answer: we don't have a substitute. The Pentagon convened emergency meetings. And in Silicon Valley, the executives building the artificial intelligence systems that were supposed to define the 21st century looked at their supply chains and discovered a terrifying truth. Every F-35 fighter jet, every electric vehicle battery, every wind turbine, every smartphone, every missile guidance system, every MRI machine, they all depend on minerals that China controls. Not partially controls, not mostly controls. China processes over 90% of the world's rare earth elements. And in that moment, the most powerful military and economic alliance in human history realized that it had voluntarily handed the keys to its future to a single adversary. But here's the question that no historian, no analyst, and no politician wants to answer. How did this happen? How did the United States, the nation that invented the semiconductor, the jet engine, and the internet, how did it allow itself to be put in a chokehold by a competitor it had been calling a strategic threat for 30 years? The answer is not a story of Chinese cunning alone. It is a story of Western greed, short-sighted economics, and a catastrophic failure to understand that in the 21st century, the most dangerous weapon is not a nuclear warhead. It is a mining permit. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we have to go back to the Mojave Desert in California in the year 1952. There, in a place called Mountain Pass, a prospector named John Mollycorp stumbled upon one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals ever discovered in the United States. Mountain Pass became the beating heart of the global rare earth industry. For 3 decades, American engineers and American workers supplied the entire world with the materials needed for color televisions, precision magnets, and early computer components. The United States did not just dominate the rare earth market, it invented it. But in the 1980s, something changed. China entered the picture. Deng Xiaoping, the architect of China's economic opening, visited Inner Mongolia and surveyed the vast mineral deposits buried beneath the desert sands. He's reported to have said, "The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths." It was not a boast, it was a strategic declaration. It was the announcement of a 50-year plan. China began to develop its rare earth industry with the single-minded focus of a state that does not answer to quarterly earnings reports. They subsidized their miners. They kept prices artificially low. They invested in processing technology. And they were patient, devastatingly, strategically patient. In the 1990s, the free market did what free markets always do when faced with a cheaper competitor. It surrendered. One by one, the rare earth mines of the United States, Australia, and South Africa closed. Not because they ran out of minerals. The minerals are still there. They closed because they could not compete with Chinese prices that were being held artificially low by state subsidy. The Mountain Pass mine in California, the once proud heart of American mineral independence, filed for bankruptcy in 2002 and shut its gates. The workers went home. The machinery rusted. The knowledge was lost. An entire industrial ecosystem built over 50 years was dismantled in a decade. And Washington watched. And Washington did nothing. The reason Washington did nothing is the most damaging part of this story. It was not ignorance. The warning signs were everywhere. In 1992, the U.S. Geological Survey published a detailed report on rare earth dependency. In 1995, the Department of Defense raised alarms about the strategic implications of losing domestic production. In 2001, a congressional hearing was held specifically on the topic of Chinese monopolization of the rare earth supply chain. The reports were filed, the hearings were held, the PowerPoint slides were presented, and then the lobbyists for the consumer electronics industry arrived in Washington and explained very politely that cheap Chinese rare earths were making American products more competitive. They explained that the free market was working exactly as it should. They explained that any attempt to subsidize domestic mining would be inefficient and anti-competitive. The economists nodded. The politicians moved on. The true cost of that decision would not arrive for another 20 years. But history, as always, was keeping the ledger. By the early 2000s, China controlled 97% of global rare earth production. This was not a secret. It was a well-documented, publicly available fact. And yet the governments of Europe, Japan, and the United States continued to offshore their manufacturing, continued to build supply chains that ran directly through Chinese territory, and continued to tell themselves that economic interdependence was a guarantor of peace. They believe that a country that sells you minerals will never become your enemy. They confused commerce with alliance. They confused a vendor with a friend. The world received its first serious warning in September 2010. A Chinese fishing trawler collided with a Japanese Coast Guard vessel near the disputed Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. Japan arrested the Chinese captain. China responded not with military force, but with something far more surgical. Without ever issuing a formal announcement, Chinese customs officials began delaying shipments of rare earth minerals bound for Japan. Processing slowed. Paperwork went missing. The delays stretched from days into weeks. The Japanese manufacturers who depended on Chinese rare earths began to panic. Within a month, prices of certain rare earth elements on global markets had tripled. Japan released the captain. The shipments resumed. No military action had been taken. Not a single shot had been fired. But the message was received in every defense ministry and every semiconductor factory in the developed world. The message was, we own your supply chain, and if you cross us, we will remind you of that fact. For a moment, the world paid attention. Japan launched an emergency program to diversify its rare earth supply. The United States Congress held more hearings. The European Union commissioned studies. Australia began developing its own deposits. And then the crisis faded from the news cycle, replaced by the next emergency, the next election, the next quarterly report. The diversification programs were underfunded. The commitments were not met. The studies gathered dust. The world went back to buying from Chinchin. And cheap always wins in the short term. This is the oldest trap in economic history. It is the same trap that brought the Ottoman Empire to its knees when it borrowed at high interest because the money was available. It is the same trap that destroyed the British Empire when it sold off its industrial assets for short-term survival. The lure of cheap always hides the cost of dependency, and the cost of dependency is always paid later at a price far higher than the savings that were made. By 2023, the situation had become structurally critical. The green energy revolution, which the Western world had committed to as a matter of both environmental necessity and industrial policy, was built almost entirely on Chinese rare earth supply chains. And in Beijing, the strategists who had been watching all of this for 30 years understood that their moment had arrived. The trade war launched by Washington had given China a political justification. The conflict over Taiwan had provided a security narrative. The dependency that Western consumers had quietly built over 2 decades of chasing cheap prices had created the leverage. When China issued its rare earth export restrictions in 2025, it was not an impulsive reaction. It was the execution of a plan that had been in preparation since Deng Xiaoping stood in that desert in Inner Mongolia and looked at the ground beneath his feet. The crisis exposed something that most Western leaders had spent their careers pretending was not true. Economic policy is security policy. The decision made in a boardroom in Delaware to source minerals from the cheapest available supplier is not a business decision with business consequences. It is a strategic decision with strategic consequences. It is a decision about who will have power over you in 20 years. The executives who made those sourcing decisions in the 1990s and 2000s are retired now, collected their bonuses. Their companies reported strong quarterly earnings, and the bill for their decisions is now being paid by governments and taxpayers and defense contractors who had no seat at the table when those choices were made. The parallels to our current moment are impossible to ignore. Today, we are watching the same pattern unfold with a new set of critical materials: the lithium fields of Chile and Bolivia, the cobalt mines of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the silicon wafer fabrication facilities of Taiwan. The same warning signs are visible. The same economists are making the same arguments about free market efficiency. The same lobbyists are presenting the same PowerPoint slides to the same congressional committees. And somewhere, in the planning bureaus of every major power, the strategists are drawing the same lesson from the same history. Whoever controls the inputs controls the future. The rare earth crisis will not end cleanly. The United States has restarted the Mountain Pass mine, but it still sends the ore to China for processing because no American facility has the capacity to do it domestically. Building that capacity will take a decade and cost tens of billions of dollars. Europe is financing new mines in Greenland and Canada, but they will not be operational at scale before 2030. Japan has been the most disciplined in its response, investing heavily in recycling technology and urban mining, which is the recovery of rare earths from old electronics. But Japan is a small nation, and the scale of the problem dwarfs any single country's ability to solve it alone. The world that allowed itself to be disarmed by the promise of cheap will now have to pay an enormous price to rearm itself. And the cruel irony is that the very minerals needed to build the weapons, the jets, the communication systems, and the green energy infrastructure of the free world are still, for now, sitting in facilities controlled by the nation those weapons are designed to deter. Deng Xiaoping was right. The Middle East had oil, and for 50 years the world understood that oil was a weapon. Nations went to war over it. Alliances were built around it. Entire foreign policies were structured to ensure its flow. We learned the lesson of oil dependency the hard way, through embargoes and price shocks and desert wars. But we learned it. We diversified. We invested in alternatives. We built strategic reserves. With rare earths, we did not learn. We watched the dependency build in real time. We had the reports, the warnings, the hearings, the historical precedents. We had every tool necessary to understand what was happening. And we chose the cheap option anyway. Because in the short term, cheap always feels like a victory. It is only when the invoice arrives, signed not by an accountant but by a general, that the true cost becomes clear. China did not conquer the world. It waited for the world to sell itself to China, one supply chain at a time. And now the reckoning is here. The invisible war for the minerals that power the future has begun. And for the first time in a generation, the outcome is not certain. This is Epochs Explained. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve. Because when the history books are written, you'll want to be among the few who saw it coming. The wars of the 21st century will not be fought with the weapons you see on the news. They will be fought over the materials inside the device you're watching this on. If you can see the pattern, leave a comment below. If you think I'm wrong, prove it. Either way, history rewards those who pay attention.